So I just want to thank everyone for joining us today. This is the June webinar in this Business Intelligence webinar series, and so far we've had some fantastic feedback, and so we're really pleased about how this is going. Now the topics are set up for the rest of this year. However, if you do have any suggestions of topics for next year's series, please let us know as well. We'll be starting to develop that this summer. Also, just a bit of housekeeping. I believe everyone already has their phones muted to avoid any background noise from interrupting, but if not, if you could please just do so, that would be fantastic. This webinar will go until approximately 12:45, just to make sure that you do still have some time in your lunch to take a breather before heading back to work. But we will be on the line until 1 o'clock if you do have any questions. This webinar series is put on by Easy Sigma Group. I believe most of you are familiar with us, but for those that are guests or just joining us for the first time, we have been around since 2000. We were actually the first organization to bring Lean Six Sigma training from a Canadian's perspective to the Canadian market, and we're very proud of that. We were also the first Canadian organization to offer certifications in Lean and Six Sigma. So as you can see, we've got on the screen here our vision and our mission, and we truly are passionate about continuous improvement and getting organizations from whatever industry to be working efficiently and effectively. Now, today's webinar is going to be facilitated by Jeff Woods. He has been the facilitator so far for all of these webinars, and I'm sure for those that have joined us previously, you can agree that Jeff does bring a wealth of knowledge to any topic that he's speaking on, and today is no exception. So you can see just a little bit more background on Jeff. He is also our primary facilitator for all of our public open enrollment programs, which do take place in Toronto. So if you are interested in any of those, we will have some information on the screen following the end of this webinar. But without further ado, Jeff, I'm going to pass it over to you and put myself on mute. Please note there is a chat box that we will be monitoring throughout the webinar. So if you do have any questions, you are welcome to use the chat box. I know Jeff will also be opening the floor, like I said, to some questions following the end of the webinar. So Jeff, I will give it over to you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Liz. And again, welcome everybody to today's topic. I think that when we look at team selection and how we kind of build the group that's going to kind of work through a project, it's a very important part, an extra part of the whole engagement, and needs a lot of thought. And if you think about it, for those who were watching the Stanley Cup playoffs last night, it's all about kind of how that team works together for the collective goal. So do they know the vision of what they're trying to accomplish? Do they know how they're going to work together? What each person brings to the table? What's expected of them? How much time's committed of theirs to moving forward? That kind of reflects back when we're building our team for our project. So kind of some overview slides at first. So you think about defining that team. We want to think about the people who are going to be on it. We want them to be directly or indirectly involved with the processes that we're looking at. We want to think about people that can support yourselves as the leaders of projects, and also bring that expertise that they can relay moving forward. And as time goes on, be able to assist the champions or sponsors or the people that are involved in the ongoing sustainment of the project. Typically, people that are working on teams are part-time working on the projects because they've got their full-time job, which is working within that process that's being looked at. Other things that you're thinking about out of the gate are project scope. How many people do we need? Are there specific skill sets, levels of expertise? How much time and effort do we think these are going to be taking? Because we want to be able to communicate that to the people that are coming on board so they understand what their role is. But before we jump into creating a team, we want to kind of roll it back and think about the journey that we're on. So before we've got a team that's about to fix something, in quotation, we first start thinking about, well, what's the problem I'm trying to solve? So just a couple of slides for anyone who's taken any of our courses, you'll probably recognize a couple of these. Defining the problem, what's the problem I'm actually trying to solve? And putting that, in front of us. We've got an irritant within the organization. We have a pain point, however that's bubbling up, whether it's because we're tracking and see it in our metrics, whether it's because our customers are complaining, or that it's a change in strategic direction, or that our employees see the pain point. Wherever that's coming from, we want to think about what is that problem. And I love this quote by Albert Einstein. And when you read it and think about it, it really makes sense. If I really understand the problem I'm trying to solve, then how I solve it becomes that much easier. If we don't really know what the issue is, but we're just going to do something, then we need to arbitrarily put a much bigger kind of change in place, because we're just hoping that we're capturing within all the changes the thing that's actually causing the pain, rather than becoming much more systematic and thinking specifically around what are those X's that are causing the pain, and being very precise around the improvements we make. So what's the problem I'm trying to solve? And we think about writing effective problem statements. So if I'm thinking about that, how would I write that up? What would it look like? What am I seeing? Am I looking at the symptoms, or looking at the causes, or am I looking at solutions, and sort of stepping back and going through that? So you'll all recall, again, love this picture, but what kind of change are we putting in place? Are we fixing the right thing? In this case, are we just putting Band-Aids on the eggs? So how does that work? And again, if you recall, for anyone that's worked with us before, we have our 5W2H way of kind of helping you quantify and qualify the issue. So it helps you, have I kind of fully explored the issue that I want to look at, and can I kind of understand where it's happening, why it's happening, what's the gap, is this worth looking at? Because often it starts with, we have this issue, then I need to sort of really understand it and quantify it, and see how big an issue is it, and what's the impact of the organization. So is it worth actually looking at or not? So we go through and try to really understand and create that problem statement. Once I have the problem, I'm going, well, what process does that live within? And if I'm going to look at that process, what part of that process is under investigation? Because we don't necessarily want to boil the ocean or look at everything. We want to look at potentially a particular component of it. So up front, the SciPoc is a great tool for helping us kind of get our arms around what it is we're actually looking at. And again, these are often all of the tools and discussions and engagement to this point are probably happening with your one-up or your champion or sponsor, whatever. You're having this discussion around what is it we're looking at and what do we want to look at. And the SciPoc's going to deliver two excellent things to you. First of all, it's going to help you define that scope of when we're looking at it, what's the trigger that starts where I want to look at it, and then what's the end step and who's that customer. So it really helps you walk through where do I want to start, where do I want to end from the context of the project that I'm looking at. And understanding that scope can really do a good job in kind of keeping the sides around the project itself, and also in relevance to this webinar, it helps me understand who needs to be in the room. So who are the team members that have to be there? So that SciPoc helps us define who those suppliers are and who those customers are that we want to make sure that we have them in. So the internal customers and plus the upstream supplier that triggers it, and the downstream customer that finally gets it. So that SciPoc really helps us know, well, who needs to be in the room? So that's a great way for us to start to understand, well, if we're going to have that team, where do they have to come from? The next thing we want to think of, well, what type of project is it? Is it a Lean Six Sigma project, general improvement, just go fix it, Kaizen, 5S? What are we looking at? And so that can help us understand some of the scoping around, length of time of the project and the types of skills that I'm going to require. Some of the ancillary people that I might want to have, I may need to have some people from finance that are, part-time seconded to the project, because there may be some analysis that needs to happen in that end, or from IT, or from other areas within the organization. So sort of thinking about where they come from. So if we think about the people that we need on the project, it's, again, when we're starting, who's my sponsor? How does this align to the strategy of the organization and the vision of the organization? Can I see how this improvement or this pain point that we want to improve ties into the organization? And so you want to make sure that you're always connected up to a sponsor. And what do we need that sponsor to do? Again, they're looking at really helping to ensure your success. Do we have a SMART goal around what we're doing, and does that align to our business? They can help make sure that those resources that you need are available. They can actively participate in the project as required. Again, we don't want them to be just there as a name on a piece of paper. You want somebody who has an active interest in the success of this project, and to the point where they actually want to be engaged to a certain amount. You don't want them to be in every meeting because that can derail the process, but you want somebody who's actively kind of questioning and pushing for success of this project. Again, they can be part of that communication up, and what this looks like, they bring a different vision and different perspective to the table. And ultimately, why do we have this? Because we want to have success around the improvement, and we want to make sure that whatever improvements made is sustained. So they kind of tie into that direction around the project, sustaining the change going forward. So when you're selecting that sponsor, again, you may have it maybe obvious and kind of built into the organization. I'll talk about that a bit more in a minute. Or you may be looking at who would be a good sponsor given this challenge and this thing that I want to look at in the organization. So, attributes like they really have an interest in solving it. They have the right authority to be doing the things that you need to have around barriers and resourcing. That they have the time to be engaged. And that time is a consistent theme throughout the kind of thought process around team, because you really need to have people who not only want to work on it, but actually can work on it. So we want to kind of have that. And again, that is an active role. We want people to be engaged, and that includes our sponsor. Team roles, champion, sponsor, kind of, you'll see, often I use the terms interchangeably, but to a certain extent, in some organizations, they have a champion, which is typically you have champions embedded in the job description of your senior leaders, where they are kind of looking down their purview of responsibility, and they're championing all of the changes that are going on. So they play a very consistent role across a number of projects that are going on. And again, come back to, in that case, they're active in actually thinking about what projects we're running and why we're running them, getting more involved in team selection, resources, and then the typical things around barriers, reviews, recommendations, etc., ensuring those project savings are realized. So sometimes you've got sort of that as a semi-permanent role within senior leadership, which is an excellent thing if you do, or if it's more ad hoc in your organization, you may be looking for kind of one-off sponsorship for a particular engagement. Project team members, kind of role and expectations. So again, you're looking for people that are directly or indirectly involved in the process. Directly, you want to make sure that you have subject matter experts, that the people who are working on the project are the people who actually do that work. Because they're the ones that know, again, the pain points that are in the process. They're the ones that actually know what really happens, not what's supposed to happen. And that's what you really want to understand. What are those things that are getting in the way of doing the work that's making it a challenge? And then how do we systematically pull those barriers out of it, or those boulders out of the flow of the stream, to have the process work better? And they bring that expertise. They're going to be involved in data collection, brainstorming, implementation of improvements, and that whole change management process. And again, if the people who do the work are involved in the solution, the change management piece is a lot easier, because they're implementing what they've been involved in. If you just take a new process to people without them being involved in it, it just creates a lot of challenges and a whole lot of latter change management issues. And typically these people are assigned part-time in the project. They're doing their work and then also assigned to the project, which is why it's really important that they understand the amount of time that they're going to be required to be on it. So we think about selection, some of the things that you want to think about, again, really important, and I can almost relate it back to if you're at a trial and it's kind of picking that jury is a big thing around kind of what's going to happen on the case, picking that A team for your project to make sure you have the right resources. Again, subject matter experts can't kind of overemphasize that. You want to make sure it's the people who do the work and understand the work that are there. But they also have to be available. And so one of the things you want to figure out up front is how much time you think you're going to need for people. Their ability to think both strategically and tactically, able to think differently, have the respect of their peers and colleagues. Sometimes there could be someone who's a big naysayer of what's going on, and you actually want to bring them into the project because they hold a lot of respect and leverage in the organization. And so find out why they have issues and find out how they can become part of the solution. Often those people can become the new process's biggest advocates, which is a good thing. Often when I'm first getting the team together and you have that first meeting, really you want to make sure that people understand what's going on. So that first meeting can be just about, okay, here's the project that we're working on. Here's why it's important. Here's how it ties into the organization and the direction strategically that we're trying to go. People understand why they were selected, what attributes they bring to the table, what's expected of them, and how much time of theirs is expected, so that they can really quantify what their role is and the impact of their role. And ideally, you just want them to know what's the project, what their role is, and to be excited to be part of it. And if you can achieve that in that first meeting, then maybe it's time to say, okay, perfect, we're going to get together to start to go through it in our second meeting. If you can have everybody understanding what it is, why we're doing it, why they're there, and them wanting to participate, that's a great start. Again, when you have that right team, think of the mix. You need everything. And this is a simple schematic that talks about, you want people who care, you want people that know the process, and people that can make the change. And you really need to have all of those components. If you're missing something, then you're going to run into issues. If people really care and they can make a change, but they don't know the process or what's going on, then that can lead to disaster, because you can make changes that actually are detrimental to the process. If you care for the change and you know what the process is, but you actually can't implement it, then that just creates frustration. It's kind of like, we know the issue, we know what has to happen, but we can't actually implement it. And again, the other component, they can do it, they know how to do it, but they don't care to actually do it. And that can just lead to lack of action because nothing ever happens. So you can think about, as you're getting your team and as you're sort of setting yourself up for success, do I have those components? Another way of looking at it, as you have the team, and again, how much time and effort you spend on this depends a little bit about the size of the project. Although I always find that any of the tools that we go through when we're working through define, measure, analyze, improve, control, all the thought processes are important to do every time. They just take less effort on smaller initiatives, or there's less time put to it. But just because it's a small project doesn't mean you want to do it poorly. You still want to be successful, and you want to be doing it as optimally as possible. So things to think about are within your team are the goals, roles, process, and interpersonal behaviors. So does the team have the specific goals and objectives? Do they know what they are? Are they aware of them? Do they agree with them? Well, that's with the role, within the roles of how they're fitting into the whole project. Do they know what they are? Do they know what they're supposed to do, and do they understand the components between what they're doing and somebody else is doing? Do they understand the boundaries? From a process perspective, how does it going to work? Do they understand the facilitation in your role? Do we understand what problem-solving process the team's going to use? Kind of what steps are we going to go? If there are newcomers to the team that haven't been on other projects, have we started with that overview of the methodology and the tools and bringing them up to speed so that they feel comfortable with the journey? And then again, how are we going to actually work as a team? What behaviors? How we resolve conflict? How are we going to make decisions? So those are thoughts that you want to think about, and that leads to a tool that we have in our toolkit. So anyone, again, who's taken any of our courses, in our Excel toolkit, we have the GRPI matrix. And this is where what you can do is have everybody in the team write how they think things are going, which you could be doing it yourself, but really it's not a matter of me thinking that I think everybody knows what they need to do. It's a matter of asking them. So they go through and kind of rate purpose and outcomes. Do we understand what's going on? Do we understand who the stakeholders are? Do we understand what we're actually trying to deliver? So by going through and having each person kind of self-identify these various components, it can really give you that anchoring snapshot to know that, yes, we're ready to move forward. And it can really quickly highlight some gaps, because you may have a really good understanding what we're trying to accomplish and how it's going to work, but there's the whole team that needs to be engaged on how to do that. So the next slide just kind of gives you a schematic of how that could be rolled up to give you a view on kind of what's working well and where do we need to spend some time to get ourselves set up and organized before we're moving forward. So this can be a great tool to use when you're first getting that team together. Do we really understand what we're trying to accomplish? So why are we doing it? Again, for that successful team, do we have shared goals and goal clarity? So do we know what at a project level, and then at an individual level, do I have clarity to know what my responsibility is? Do we have that commitment to the role, team, and achieving the goal? What's the view on the leadership? Do we have strong leadership? And a lot of that's going to be kind of yourself and then up through your sponsor. Is there mutual respect for team members, for the process, for the organization? Effective communication, thinking about how we, not only how are we going to communicate amongst the team, but also how are we going to take that and communicate our project through to the greater organization. And how are we working around autonomy, diversity? Do we have all the adequate resources that we're going to need? Again, those resources can be the people that are on the team, but also have we identified other part-time people that we're going to need to be kind of being responsible or needing to be responsible to the project at certain times. And again, I mentioned before, but examples can be going to need some resources from finance, going to need some resources from IT. Let's start to lay that groundwork and understand how that's going to work up front so that we have that in place for when we need it. What are those characteristics of the team members? Again, when you're thinking about it, you want to make sure that you've got a really good mix of people. And some of the attributes you can be thinking about, I mentioned before around, you may have someone who's a key influencer and potentially a negative influencer. So do I want to bring them into the team, and how can I engage them? It can be some risk, but some great reward when you do that, rather than just ignoring it and hoping it goes away, because typically they don't. So how do I bring them into the fold, understand their concerns, and make sure, because maybe they have some valid concerns. Let's make sure we understand how that works. Other things to think about is a mixture of newer employers or newer employees, because they have potentially some perspective from outside the organization. They've seen things happen differently, so they have some different ideas and some different viewpoints. You also want to have people that have been there a long time, that have that legacy, that understand kind of who we are, where we've been, and have that sort of long view. So kind of thinking about all the different components that you can pull together. Again, you want to have that A team, that team that you think can really take you to a successful project end. Which again, just because we had the Stanley Cup last night, we have the Raptors tonight. You can think of that from a sports analogy around, right? What's that team I need to drive me to be successful? And in sports, it's to raise the crown, which hopefully is the Raptors tonight. But anyway, we'll see. So these are all the things that you want to be thinking about as you're picking that team. What's the right size of team? One of the nice things around the SIPOC is the SIPOC can tell you who needs to be in the room, but it also can help you identify who doesn't need to be in the room. Because one of the key barriers to success in projects sometimes is that they just get too big and they get unnavigable. So we can't really understand kind of where we're going. We can't have a team meeting because we have 20 people we're trying to put in the room and no one's available till next February. So who needs to be in the room and who doesn't need to be in the room? Another tool, if you're having challenges with that, is the RACI chart. So the RACI chart can really help you identify roles and responsibilities. And sometimes you can have some kind of peripheral people that kind of want to know what's going on because it's important to them, that they can be identified as long as they're informed and they are thoughtfully and actually built into the plan to be informed, that they're okay with that. But you don't want that to be an ad hoc thing. Oh yeah, I'll let you know what's going on. Build it in, make it part of the plan. And so it's part of your communication strategy, and it's identified within the RACI chart. And then you can have people that say, okay, I know how I fit into this. I know that you'll come to me and I'll be consulted if I need to be. But other than that, you guys can go ahead. So those are all the things that you really want to be thinking about as you're going through your project. Again, this is just to pick the team and to get it going, but get that early success. And so hopefully this gives you some great ideas around things that you want to make sure you're thinking about up front rather than reflecting later going, yeah, I wish I could have, should have done something differently. Roles over time. This is just something to think about as you're going through your project. Where's time going to be spent and who's going to be spending it? Because often in that define stage and in that measure stage, you have, a big role to play as kind of the leader of kind of really understanding and driving a lot of what's going on. And then as we move through into improve and control, a lot more gets taken over more by the business unit itself, and that there's that transfer of time, effort, and responsibility. And this is sort of a typical schematic of kind of how that effort goes, but also thinking about it from a responsibility and that ownership transfer. Because what we want to make sure that in that control phase, that all of a sudden everybody doesn't walk away and the thing falls down. There has to be that very directive handover back to the process owner and the people who are running the business with the changes in the process that's now been documented, good visual management, the right metrics, and all the other things that you want to put in place. So that kind of takes us through that. And we keep talking about team, and I kind of want to end it with remembering for yourself that now that you have the team, you want to make sure that you're using them appropriately, that they're engaged and they stay engaged, that you're always making sure that you're getting the most out of everyone that's working with you, because if they're on the team, they're there for a reason, and make sure that you're using them. Again, sometimes it doesn't matter how many resources you have. If you don't know how to use them, right, it'll never be enough. So think about how can you most effectively use everybody that you have to be driving to the solution, to the process that you're trying to change. And that kind of brings us through the thought process around that team selection. On one hand, it's really easy. And on the other hand, if we follow the right steps and think about the right things at the right time and make the right decisions, we're going to get to that place of having, that A team that's going to help you and help the organization be successful. So that kind of takes us through. Before we get to the wanting to learn more, kind of want you to think about any questions that you have about this. topic. Again, it's not a speak now or forever hold your peace. If you have any questions, kind of have a question thing coming up, you can ask away, or if you get back, leave today and you come up with something that you want, or you're working on a project and picking a team and it's 2 months from now, please reach out. We're always available to answer any questions. Again, you have my email address, Liz. They know my email address, and they know how to get a hold of you. I guess they could go just through info, but for those that have mine, they can just reach out.
Jeff, we did actually have a question come through in the chat window.
Okay.
Just wondering, is there a tool that you would recommend we should use to assess team members' ability to think strategically prior to selecting? Now, is that the RASI chart that you had mentioned earlier, or is there another tool that you would recommend?
So as far as if we're trying to assess whether they are strategic thinkers versus or not, we don't have any specific ones we use. There's a whole bunch of different kind of behavioral tools out there that are available. But if you like, and if you want to send Liz an email about it, then what we can do is we can research and follow up and give you some suggestions. But there's lots of different ones out there that different organizations already use, but we can definitely recommend and take a look and give you some suggestions.
All right. Thank you, Jeff.
Okay. Any other questions at this point? Sorry, back to you, Liz.
Nope, that's quite all right. Just while everyone's considering everything that Jeff has been speaking about, I just wanted to let you know, as mentioned, we do have some open enrollment certification programs in Lean and Six Sigma. So these ones do include some e-learning modules and then in-class time that takes place in Toronto. The next wave of training will be getting started in the fall. So if you do have any interest about that, feel free to reach out to us. Also, we do offer on-site corporate training. There's e-learning programs, including some soft skills. We do offer a leadership series program, which includes courses on effective communication, active listening, managing generations, understanding change, conflict management. So some great tools there as well. And of course, there's always some coaching, consulting, project management services, depending on what your interests are or needs of your organization are. For some upcoming webinars, you can see we've got them scheduled up until December. Again, they will be taking place on Thursdays, always at 12:15 from 12:45. So if you haven't already scheduled or, signed up for these, please, again, feel free to send us an email. There will be notifications going out every month, as I'm sure you've been aware of so far. And if, like I said at the beginning of this, if anyone has any suggestions for webinar topics for next year, please do let us know, as we'll be putting together that schedule over the next couple of months. So I'll open the floor once again. If anyone has any further questions, feel free to speak up or put them in the chat box. We will be here for another 10 minutes or so, but if we don't hear any voices or any questions for a 2-minute period, then we will definitely cut off, so we're not feeling awkward with dead silence. So thank you again, everybody, for joining us. It's wonderful to connect with you once again, and we definitely hope to have you back here next month.
Thanks, everybody, and open up for questions. But other than that, have a great day. And I'm allowed to say, hopefully the Raptors win tonight.
Hear, hear.